Welcome to our North Alabama Agriplex 6th Annual Harvest to Home Celebration and Fundraiser. My name is Rachel Dawsey. I am the director at the North Alabama Agriplex. Like I said, this is our 6th annual fundraiser, but things are a little bit different in 2020, just like they're a little bit different in everybody else's lives right now. So we still wanted to do our fundraiser, and we still wanted to promote our local farmers and local produce. So we're just finishing up our online silent auction with local gifts and businesses giving us items to be donated. And then our Harvest to Home boxes, meal prep boxes, is our substitute for our usual local foods dinner. We started coming up with this idea because we wanted to promote our wonderful agriculture resources here in North Alabama, and we also wanted to eat good food. And so we knew that meal prep boxes had been popular, so we started talking to our local farmers about it. They were up for the idea, and farmer Trent Boyd introduced us to Chef Braxton Taylor at Drayer's. Braxton has been featuring local foods on the menu at Drayer's and has been buying from local farmers. So when we started our partnership with him, he was used to what was in season, what we could get locally, and he came up with a great menu that you're going to be preparing today. So our recipe is Argentinian, pan-fried Argentinian, and cornbread ratatouille. So our ingredients are almost all sourced locally. Inside your box, you're going to have everything you need except for a few items like salt, pepper, olive oil, butter, and milk. So hopefully all of these are on your meal cards, and they will, everything else will be in your box. The recipe card should help you, but if you want to follow along with this video of Chef Braxton actually going through the whole process of preparing the meal, you can do so. Feel free to pause where you need to, fast forward through what you don't need to, and hopefully this will make an enjoyable time of preparation, knowing that there's people all over Coleman County preparing the meal, and we will eat in our own homes, but share the same wonderful produce together. Also, a big thanks. We thought you might be tired after you've done your salad of local greens, your meat, your chimichurri sauce, and your cornbread. So we had some great volunteers from Farm City, Soil and Water Conservation, the Agriplex, use our local sweet potatoes from Crest Farms to make some great sweet potato desserts for you. So we just slipped those in as a little bonus. So we hope that will round out your local foods dinner. All of the proceeds from our Harvest to Home events, the silent auction, and the boxes will go to promote the programs at the Agriplex. Please check out our website, www.agriplex.org, and follow us on Facebook at North Alabama Agriplex to see all the different programs that your funding will help us to do and reach out to the community. So have a good dinner. Enjoy.
Hello, my name is Braxton. I'm chef here at Drayer's Cocktail Bar and Restaurant in Coleman, and very happy to be a part of this Farm to Table initiative, the movement in Coleman, and also working with the Agriplex on this project. I'm very, very happy to work with local products and support the community, and looking forward to helping you cook. All right, cool. So laid out over here, we have all the ingredients that we're going to use. The knife is kind of our divider. Here we have what we're going to use for the chimichurri, and here we have what we're going to use for our cornbread ratatouille. And we're going to do the pan steak a little bit later. So let's start off with some mise en place, as they say, chopping up the things we're going to use for the chimichurri, which starts with this fresh parsley. Going to take and just get a fine chop on it. It doesn't have to be crazy fine because of what we're going to do with it. We're going to add it to the mortar and pestle here in a second and get it all ground up and mixed in. And I'm cooking a one-time batch on this recipe. I'm cooking one steak today, although the box serves two. So for the cornbread, it'll be all included there. But for the pan steak and this chimichurri, you'll just double up your portions there. Take your oregano. I think about this much is going to be fine. You do want to stem the oregano. That stem, and we're not cooking anything, we're not softening anything up for this chimichurri, so that stem would get in the way and be not a very pleasant experience as a steak topping. Little detail on chimichurri. This is something that I was introduced to when I lived in Argentina for a little bit. This is a very common steak topping there. Anytime you go out to a steak restaurant, you know, here we have Heinz 57 or A1, or, you know, some of you get the well done steak with ketchup. You know, to each their own, I guess. But in Argentina, it's chimichurri. They put it over choripan. They put it over straight up grilled steaks like what we're going to do, or open fire steaks. And in this case, we're making a pan steak with it. We're going to get all that delicious garlic flavor in the meat with salt and pepper, just make it a super rich, savory experience. And then this chimichurri, especially with this mint in there, is just going to make for, well, I think a unique experience. I don't think a lot of people are super familiar with chimichurri on steak in this area. And I thought it was a great way when Rachel from the Agriplex here sent me the ingredients list of what we're using, what we're sourcing locally. I really wanted to do what I could to incorporate as much as possible into this dish that we're doing, into this meal kit. I wanted to get as many local farms and local resources of any kind involved in this. And so that's why I chose this chimichurri, because we had several different sources listed for such spices as these. And I just wanted to use as much as possible. Now, on this bell pepper, it's kind of the same deal. Remember to take your stickers off your produce before you cut them, okay? You don't want any plastic in your food. That's kind of the whole point of Whole Foods, isn't it? I'm a little bit nervous, if you can't tell by my hands. I am not used to cooking in front of people, and definitely not used to talking while I'm cooking. So this is a new experience for me too, so we're learning together. You're learning how to cook this exact recipe, and I'm learning how to cook with very shaky hands. This does need to be finer than this. Not to mention, for those of you that know, cooking in a kitchen that you've never cooked in for the first time is an experience, and I'm doing it on video. So bear with me today. We're all amateurs together today, that's for sure. Some of this, just give it a little bit of that bell pepper sweetness on top of the mint. Now the mint does have a tendency to overpower the other ingredients, the other herbs in this chimichurri. So you want to make sure to balance that with bell pepper, because that bell pepper sweetness kind of carries all throughout. And when you're cooking for yourself, no need to worry about, you know, well, I guess certain aspects of lost my train of thought. We have our mint, oregano, and parsley in here. We've diced up some red bell pepper, and you can give that a nice smell right now. That's what I was speaking of. It's okay to pick it up and smell it, taste it along the way. When you're cooking at home, or really when you're starting out cooking anyway, it's important actually to taste as you go. Don't be nervous about these recipes. Don't be trying to follow each individual step so precisely. It's important to take liberties with what you're doing and taste what you're doing, because that's what being a cook is all about. Anybody can cook at home and follow a recipe, but you really can take something and make it special if you take it and make it yours. That's what it's all about, really. So, for example, for this chimichurri, we're using 1 part apple cider vinegar, and 1 part olive oil. Now, this is substituted today. We have red wine vinegar in place of apple cider vinegar. That was just a sourcing problem for today. You'll see we have a couple other things plugged in too, and it's important for you to know that too. It's okay to substitute some items. That's great. It's okay to substitute some items, or to play with the ratios a little bit. For example, like I said, it's 1 and 1, but if you like it a little bit more oily and less bite from that vinegar, throw in a touch more splash of oil. That's fine. But that is our chimichurri. That is set up. We're ready to go. The longer that sits at room temp, the better it gets. So we're going to leave it sit right there in the mortar and pestle while we continue with the rest of our prep. Alright. Now, another little twist we can add. This is a red jalapeno from Burke's Farm in Fairview. If you would like to make the chimichurri a touch more spicy, should I be talking to this camera, you think? If you would like to make your chimichurri a touch spicier, add some diced jalapeno along with the red bell pepper, or you can substitute if you don't want the sweetness. It's really up to you. Take your liberties on that. You see also, I'm going to set this over here. We're calling for goat cheese from Humble Hearts Farm. What I have today is cotija cheese. This is a really crumbly cheese. It's actually what's used to make queso when you go out to Mexican restaurants. You can see it crumbles in your hand like this. That's what we're going to use to top our steak today. It acts the same way as a goat cheese that isn't overly creamy, and it certainly serves the same purpose. It's nice and salty and really brings that dish all together. Now, what we need to do next is slice eggplant. The eggplant you'll be getting in your box is not this massive thing. This is a massive eggplant. We're not trying to work with one that large. But, for the sake of today, we're going to look for eggplant medallions about this thin. It's okay if it's not perfect. Mine sure are not. But this is going to be layered into our cornbread. And I will also, when we get to that point in this video, I'm going to make a gluten-free version of this cornbread ratatouille as well. It's just going to be an actual ratatouille without the cornbread. That's certainly enough of this massive thing. Next, our green tomato. For the restaurant at Dreyer's, we source our green tomatoes from a mixture of farms. Burke's Farm, Boyd's Harvest Farm. You don't want that part in there. We're keeping the whole slice, so slice down into the tomato until that part is out of it. If you keep it for composting purposes, do that, but you can also dice it up and use it for, well, other purposes. Everyone's always talking about, I guess, knife skills and precision. When you're cooking at home, or when you're cooking anytime, this is something I teach in the kitchen at Dreyer's, and my sous chef David as well. It's not about precision. It's about the flavor of the food. And if your food is turning out tasting good, then it's going to taste good. And it doesn't matter if, like I talk about with herbs all the time, if there are certain herbs you're using that have stems in them that are going to cook down, don't worry about destemming them. If you have, well, any produce like this really, but it's not about precision. It's not about getting that exact quarter-inch cut on this, that, or the other. It's about making the food taste good. And if you're cooking with love, I actually do say that a lot. If you're cooking with love, leave the stems in, because it'll still taste good. It's going to turn out very well. We have such pressure, and I don't know why. Cooking is treated so much like a science, and of course it is scientific in nature, but for the most part cooking is an art, and it's something you do with love, and if you have love, you don't need precision. How about that? And you will notice the recipe called for 2 red tomatoes for this ratatouille. The tomato that I found this morning in our walk-in is massive, so we only needed 1. Again, it's just one of those, you develop a certain I don't want to use the term to offend anyone, but you develop a certain common sense once you cook enough at home or anywhere else. You develop a certain common sense around it, and you can kind of pick and choose and kind of feel out what to plug in where and what is precise and what is not. For instance, baking powder and baking soda ratios do need to be fairly precise, whereas, like I've been saying, these cuts don't have to be very precise. Our okra this week came from one individual named Kathy Howard. I believe the name of her farm is Five Oaks Farm, and that is listed in the Agriplex's guide for a number of things. I believe, I know since I've been sourcing from her for the restaurant, it's been mostly okra. I believe she's also told me she has some squash available, but Kathy Howard is a good connection for a lot of things like this, and particularly today's delicious and beautiful green okra. I'm running out a little bit of prep room, so I'm going to take some of these veggies that I've sliced and move them back out of my way so I can keep going. And this is really the heart of this here. That steak, obviously the protein always seems to be the centerpiece when we're cooking, but these fresh veggies are really the heart of this dish. Now you'll notice from the chimichurri I saved a bit of that bell pepper. This recipe calls for a whole bell pepper here and another one in the chimichurri, but as you saw I only used half of it, and I believe half of this red bell will be more than enough for this cornbread as well. And this one we're dicing up instead of slicing. We want to get it pretty small because all these veggies that are listed under dice, we're going to mix into the cornbread batter. Literally, as we mix it in the bowl, we're just going to throw this in like it's salt or baking powder or any other ingredient going in. And you're just going to be chunks all throughout that batter, hopefully. Now, a little word of warning. It does, when you mix things like this into batters, I've done this before with cakes and sweet things. And obviously with this cornbread, when you mix things like this into your batter, it may or may not settle to the bottom. I have yet to figure out what the environmental factor is, what the variable is that makes that happen sometimes and not at others, but it's no big deal. Everything will still cook very evenly. These veggies, every veggie that's going in here except for that eggplant, can really be eaten raw and taste pretty good. That's something that not a lot of people know, and we do that at the restaurant too, actually. People have a tendency at home, and other restaurants too, I've seen you go out and get a sauteed veggie or a grilled veggie, and that thing is cooked until it is soft, and that seems to be like this idea, like when you're cooking noodles, when it's soft it's done, and that's not the case. And I just learned this recently from my sous chef, David, actually. When you cook veggies to the point that they're soft, you're losing nutritional value, and honestly, you're losing flavor. Try this taste test sometime. Take some of this diced bell pepper, take anything else, and cook it. Saute it until it's soft, you know, like you normally would, and then have some next to it where you literally just got it heated up, threw some salt and pepper and oil on there, and you'll see the difference in the taste. It's much more of a veggie taste. Much more of that fresh veggie taste comes through, rather than the flavor of the grill or whatever other seasoning you use to make those veggies taste good. And I hear that a lot too. You know, how do you make this veggie taste good? And it's like, this veggie tastes good by itself. Have you ever had a Tasty Lee tomato from Burke's Farm? Have you ever had an heirloom tomato? I'm serious. I nearly dropped dead the first time that Trent Boyd from Boyd's Harvest Farm came by the restaurant and dropped off some heirloom tomatoes for us to try. I nearly dropped over right then at how delicious those tomatoes were. And, you know, I've seen this as a kid. As a kid, we do get grossed out when our parents, I've seen this, at least I did. It's kind of a gross thing to most kids to see parents just put salt and pepper on a tomato or just to take a slice of tomato and a slice of cheese and make a sandwich out of that. I saw my grandparents do that. I saw my mom do that a lot when I was a kid, and it's a gross idea, or it seems gross for some reason, but you know, I'm only 24, but I'm already seeing this more, I guess because of cooking as often as I do. I'm seeing that, you know what, there is value in how these veggies taste coming straight out of the ground, and that's really the emphasis that I'm putting on food, and the direction that I'm trying to show Coleman County and Coleman City through the means of Dreyer's is, you know what, let's let these ingredients speak for themselves. We don't have to do, I mean, we obviously try to make that plate look good, but we don't have to do this crazy plating. We don't have to do 45 seasonings and 3 different ways to cook it. Let's cook this veggie the way that it came to us. Let's just throw some heat on it, and let's talk about how good this food tastes coming straight from the earth. Because that's what we need to get back to. I really do believe that. Obviously, I've made it my career to talk about and to bring awareness to how we're getting away from real food. We're getting away from whole foods, and we're going to meat that we don't know where it came from, and meat that's been on the truck, on the back of a truck, coming to us from God knows where. It's been on the back of a truck for a week. Or produce the same way. How can it be that I get produce from one grocery supplier and it lasts on my shelf for 3 weeks, and that same item, when I get it straight from a farm, lasts for a couple of days? Something's up there, and I think that this will help bring awareness to that, and I hope that that's what Dreyer's is doing too. I hope people will see that whole foods taste better, and that's just what it's all about. Whole foods taste better. Now, a little trick with garlic. If you'll not peel it and take the side of your knife and pop it, it will be easier to peel. Boom. That skin, or whatever, we call that a skin? I don't know what you'll call that. Somebody comment and let me know what to call the skin of garlic. Is that just a peel? I don't know. I don't like that. There should be something to that. The leaf? I don't know. That outer layer falls right off when you pop that with a knife. And then we're just going to kind of grind this up. This is going to be used more like a seasoning than obviously one of the veggies. So the finer you get this, the better. I'll even call it a mince. I think it's called a dice in the recipe, but it's a mince. And even almost a grind if you can get it into a grind. And don't be scared to mix these together right out of the bat. They're all going together in a minute anyway. Next we have our basil. So yeah, we grow this basil right at Dreyer's. Out back of the restaurant we grow basil, thyme, microgreens. We have sunflowers, which when we get to this, we have sunflower seeds that I brought from Dreyer's today, which we'll get to that in a minute. But anyway, yes, I thought that was a cool little highlight that we have our own fresh herb garden. We're just going to take this, and it's listed as a dice as well, but again, this is for flavor. It's not for crunch. It's not for texture. It's for flavor, and you're going to get good aromatics out of this really by just getting nice little chop on it. There's our basil. Next, we're going to destem our thyme. And this is a trick I learned at Marta, Manhattan, at the last restaurant I worked at before Dreyer's. Every single day when we came in, we had a lineup at, I believe it was 3 o'clock. And this is all we sat there and did. We talked about how many covers we had to do that night, what our specials were, if we had specials, what our family meal was going to be. And we all just stood around and looked at each other and had a nice conversation. We had a nice family atmosphere there. And the entire time, our entire time of lineup, we talked about having too much time on our hands. Get it? Time? Anyway, yeah, you just take your finger at the end of that stem and kind of pull it back, and it gets most of those leaves off. And I don't know how often home cooks really use thyme, but it's a really, really delicious smelling and tasting herb, and I love cooking with it. And I was excited when I saw it on the list of ingredients. I just knew that it was going to go on whatever we were going to cook. And really, you don't even have to chop that up. Once that's stemmed, we can leave that like that. This oregano is left over. We have garlic ready to go. And we're ready to move on to the heat. I'm not sure about what utensils you have at your home, But for me, I like cooking cornbread in a cast iron. I also, when I do pan steaks, I like doing those in cast iron. So what I'm going to do today is use our small cast iron for like a personal sized cornbread ratatouille, and I'm going to cook our pan steak in the cast iron. So I'm going to add a splash of olive oil just to cover the bottom really. You can get it rolling around. Just get that bottom nice and covered, maybe a little extra. But you're going to have some natural oils released from the veggies once you start cooking them. So you don't have to be incredibly conservative with the olive oil. So just like our recipe says, cover the bottom in olive oil and get started on a little medium-high heat. Now you do want to wait to throw these veggies on until that olive oil is hot. Otherwise you're going to get soggy, and that olive oil is really going to absorb into those veggies. And we're going to get very, well, just not the flavor that we're looking for. I suppose we can start with the cornbread batter while we're waiting on that. Flour, cornmeal. So our recipe calls for 1 cup of yellow cornmeal and 1 cup of all-purpose flour. In this scenario, I'm realizing right now that I got enriched white cornmeal, not yellow cornmeal, but that is okay. We will come out with the same flavor. Those veggies are really what we want to shine anyway. In this scenario, we're just looking for a nice half and half. That looks to be about right. Before you do anything else, you're going to want to take a whisk to this and get that combined. You don't want flour cooking apart from the cornmeal or vice versa. You want that all really, really incorporated well before you bring anything else into the mix. That looks about right to me. You hear the sizzle, it's ready to roll. Be sure to be looking out in your pan for hot spots. Make sure that garlic is not staying in one spot. That garlic will scorch very quickly. Just keep everything moving. You don't want anything to settle. You don't want anything to even really to cook per se here. You're looking for the onions to get translucent and get heated up. You're definitely not trying to get them soft or any softer than they have to be, I suppose. Cast iron gets hot pretty quickly. We are just about done with this already. Just like that, we can take it off the heat. Be sure to remember, turning the eye off is not enough. Be sure to remove it from that eye because your eye stays hot for another couple of minutes after you've gotten started. So like I spoke to earlier, we're amateurs together today, cooking in a kitchen I've not cooked in before, and figuring out what utensils I need as I go. We're all in this together. High School Musical, anyone? want to drain as much as you can, and be sure to get the stovetop really messy. I say this a lot in other videos that I shoot for my personal social media. If you're not getting every single surface in the kitchen just dirty, if you're not just like really making a deep clean necessary when you're done, then you're not really cooking. You got to get everything dirty. Cool. So like I said, drain as much as possible. You're still going to have like a little bit of a sludge in there. That's okay. It's going to contribute to our cornbread batter very nicely. I do believe the recipe says to add another splash of olive oil. What I have in the pan here is pretty good. You can see there's still a little bit of the veggie left and enough olive oil to run kind of when I pick it up. So that's really fine for what we're about to do. And if we need to add more as we go, then we can do that. Now we're just going to saute the sliced veg. Just a light saute across the board. Get our heat back going. Just lay these in there. Not quite hot enough again. That aside. That aside. Perfecto. You know what, let's go on and drizzle some over the top. Thought I brought some tongs with me today. It appears that I did not. So we're cooking with a spatula. This is salt and pepper I'm adding. Salt and pepper can go on anything and everything really, except for chocolate cake. I believe it's Gordon Ramsay that says more color, more flavor. That's what we're looking for on this. You don't want to saturate them in oil. There are a couple pieces here that perhaps are a little too oily. As you can see, this one kind of got a brunt of the oil. But we're just trying to get some color on these before we add them to our cornbread. We're treating these almost like little hamburgers. Little veggie hamburger patties. Another little round of salt and pepper, and we're just letting this get up to temperature. You can see it's got some of the mixture from the onions and garlic and tomatoes that we just did. That's perfectly fine. We want all these flavors to incorporate, and that eggplant is certainly going to stick out by its own anyway. And these eggplant medallions are going to soften up a good bit, but you want to cook these through until they start to crisp again. Because there are going to be plenty of environmental factors. And once we get this into the cornbread batter, there's going to be plenty that's going to want this to get soggy. And we don't want that. So it's as hard of a crisp as we can get is a good thing. I keep turning this heat up because I keep expecting this to get crispy faster. Certainly got enough oil in there. We want those to get a nice hard sear on them, because once we get them into the cornbread batter, there's going to be plenty that is going to want it to get soggy, and we don't want that. We want it to be crispy, and even after it bakes into that cornbread, we want that eggplant to still have the integrity and the texture of an eggplant medallion. So we're cooking this in olive oil to get a hard sear on it, which is the same reason that anytime I cook a pan steak, like we're going to do here in a minute after we get this cornbread baking, anytime I cook a pan steak, it's a mixture of butter and olive oil, 50-50, some ratio like that, because the olive oil gets it nice and crispy on the outside. Nice hard sear, which is of course what you want on a steak. And then on the inside, that butter really seeps down into the red meat and gets it nice and tender all throughout. You can see I'll pull one out of here. We're starting to get some nice color, kind of brown, definitely blackening around the edges where the skin is, and that's what we want. That's a good thing. Don't be scared of color. I think I just said it. Gordon Ramsay says more color, more flavor. Don't be scared of color. So our goal here, what we're getting to, is we want the eggplant medallion, when you pick it up about halfway off that spatula, to not really flop down, which all of them are still doing at this moment. There we go. Now we're getting somewhere. Oh, that's beautiful. I love that color. That's honestly, that's better cooked than these two are. I like that color a lot. That's going to be delicious. That one right there. Okay. Next, touch more olive oil. Turn the heat down a little bit. Now at this point, if you're cooking with a cast iron, you already know this, but this is when the handle starts to get kind of hot. You're going to want to be aware of that. That's what I want right there. Now I'm cooking with extra virgin olive oil, Delicato olive oil, so it's super super poppy. That's what I would call it. It pops a lot, so you're gonna get hurt. Blood, sweat, and tears are going into this dish, and that's a good thing. It means it's made with all the love. If you're not getting burned, you're not cooking with love. How about that? Just going to take this time, run some oil over to one side if you can. Throw in this okra too. And okra, everybody has their preference on okra. You either love or hate boiled okra. You either love or hate fried okra. You either love or hate okra. That's just kind of how it works with okra for some reason. I've yet to find somebody that's just kind of indifferent about okra. For me, I could put this okra into the cornbread batter. I could put it in raw, and I would really enjoy that. It's crunchy, and it adds a different texture entirely to the cornbread ratatouille. And you don't want it to be all flop. You don't want it to be all the gritty, grainy of the cornbread, followed by just soggy mush vegetables. You want it to be nice and crispy. You want it to have some character to it. You know what I'm saying? tongs would be great, but it's another thing we're adding to this whole cooking at home thing. You may not have tongs at home. I don't have tongs here. You may not have a cast iron at home. You may be cooking all this in a metal skillet. That's fine. This okra, or this squash, I mean, I'm pretty happy with it. We're starting to get a little bit of color on it, on one side at least. Kind of keep it spread around so that each medallion has its own space to cook. So a little bit of color on this. And you'll notice at about this point in cooking the okra, it's going to start running that slimy, delicious, gooey stuff that you normally get on it when you boil it. That's what you want. You want to cook that until that's just about done doing that. You can go by color on that, the way we are with the eggplant medallions and the squash. But if you go by the feel, if you go by that nice sticky stuff being gone, that's nice and done too. I would love it if somebody would let me know what the gooey stuff coming out of the okra is called. I'm interested in knowing that. A little salt and pepper to the okra. We're not heavily seasoning. That may have looked like a lot, but it was just a dash. Really letting the veggies speak for themselves as much as possible. And we can always salt and pepper this later down the line too if we feel like we need to. Oh yeah, we're getting there now. Getting nice and brown on both sides. Really that deep yellow that comes before the brown on squash. I'm okay with the deep yellow. Either way, you're going to want to set all of these veggies on a paper towel and get them nice and drained. That olive oil is going to run back out of them, and then some of those natural juices that come out too are going to run out of them. You want to not dehydrate, but certainly remove the moisture as much as possible with a paper towel. Alright, heat's starting to get a little out of hand. Turning it back down. We're removing these. To a paper towel. This is an important part of the process. If you're not directly following what we're doing, if you're trying to take some liberties on your own, I wouldn't suggest a liberty that you take being leaving this go. I would definitely recommend getting some of the oil removed from these veggies as much as possible. And again, I will preach this over and over and over and over again. Don't be scared of color. I like this. That's nice and crispy. This too, it's going to be delicious. Don't be scared of color on your veggies, on your meat even. Don't be scared of it at all. Just let that sit there while we keep going with the rest of our veg. So by now, I'm guessing if you know what ratatouille is, then you know this is not a traditional ratatouille. Traditional ratatouille, you're going to cut up, you're going to kind of marinate, and you're going to bake in a dish in the oven. For what we're doing here is a southern ratatouille. It's something I'm interested in trying at the restaurant too. I've been thinking about it for a while, but it's taking veggies that are not traditionally in ratatouille, like green tomatoes, and taking these and really making ratatouille that's our own. It's kind of like we have this one item at the restaurant that I came up with called the Southern Beef Welly. We take a beef fillet, and instead of, in a traditional sense, rubbing it down in duxels and mushrooms and then wrapping it in puff pastry and baking it, as a traditional beef Wellington is, we take a fillet and we coat that like a country fried steak in all-purpose flour with some of our house seasoning in that, and we bake that, or we fry that like a fried steak. And kind of the same deal with this ratatouille. We're putting a southern spin on it. We're taking local veggies, taking something that's traditionally done one way, and putting Alabama stamp on it, if you will. And at this point, I'm not adding salt and pepper to these anymore. This pan is nice and delicious from all the stuff that I've cooked in it before. That garlic, those onions, and then the salt and pepper, not the salt and pepper that I've added to the veggies that I just cooked right before this. We're getting a nice flavor throughout, so I'm not adding any more seasoning to this. We're just letting that oil do its job on a slightly higher heat than that. I thought I brought some with me, so here we are. I had tongs the whole time, and that's going to make this a lot easier. That's what cooking with me is like. A lot of fun. Wow. Did you see these standing here? You did, didn't you?
Yeah, well, honestly, I didn't know if it was ours or yours.
I brought them with me. I brought them from the restaurant and forgot about them. I love that. It's funny. Ah! These green tomatoes take a little bit extra. There's so much moisture in them. We may even end up throwing those in a baking sheet and baking those off a little bit. So we've got squash, okra, eggplant, and green tomatoes. It smells so good in here right now. I'm a fan of that smell. So we are finished with sauteing our veggies. We're going to remove that from heat for a moment and kind of collect our bearings. Alright, so this is the hard part for me. I am not a baker by any means. I say this all the time when talking about desserts at the restaurant or anything else. I'm by no means a baker. So what we're going by is, as specifically as possible, the ratios for the baking powder and baking soda are pretty important. Which is obviously why I'm not measuring. I'm just dumping in, right? looking for about 2 teaspoons of the baking powder, which that's a touch more. Now we're about right. A half a teaspoon of the baking soda, so I would call that a dash. That's about it right there. Again, if you're more comfortable, certainly use measuring devices. That's totally fine. And then 1.5 cups of buttermilk. But before we do the buttermilk, as I wrote in the recipe, we do want to make sure that everything is whisked really well together, because it's the same deal with the cornmeal and the all-purpose flour. With that baking soda and baking powder, we do want that to mix all throughout very evenly before we bake it. So we create a well in the center, which is really just a little place for everything to sit. And you crack your eggs right in. See? Oh yeah. If you can crack an egg with one hand, you're pretty cool. At least that's what I like to think. Because I can do it, you know what I mean? I feel a little less like an amateur myself when I'm cracking eggs. And it is okay to get the buttermilk mixed in too. It's going to avoid this clumpiness, along with the egg, I should say. But I like to get the egg kind of mixed in a little bit first. I guess for no particular reason, really. That's just what I do. I'm going to go with 1.5 cups of buttermilk. Always shake it before you measure it, but in this case, I'm not measuring. And I talk about ratios. Baking powder and baking soda are certainly important, as well as the salt content. But honestly, once you start adding the liquid to the dry ingredients in any batter, it's a matter of feel more than anything. And it seems like I just added a bunch of milk froth to this rather than milk itself. So I'm about to add a touch more. Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. This is the part that I'm most nervous about, is the cornbread. I remember when I first started trying my hand at baking, I kind of did this whole thing all at one time, making batters / doughs. The time that I started getting into baking is the same time that I started getting into making pasta. It's a lot of trial and error, and I'm hoping that these specific instructions will be easy enough to follow for this cornbread. But if you're at home and you are and you're wondering how good this cornbread is gonna, how well it's gonna turn out, or if you're nervous about it, I mean, don't be. You might mess it up, but you have most of these ingredients at home, and you can always try trial and error over and over again until you get it right. I know for me, when I first made biscuits, I made probably, actually, I stayed up until 3:30 in the morning. I was living at home, and I remember my dad waking up at like 3:30 and coming out of his bedroom and saying, "What are you doing?" And I was like, I'm trying to bake biscuits. I cooked 8 or 9 batches of biscuits back to back to back until I got a batch of biscuits just right. And then I wasn't even hungry for biscuits anymore. I just put them on the stove and went to bed. But that's just how it is with baking. Personally, I hate baking. It does make it so much of a science, and you have to worry about ratios. Little side note while I'm just rambling away about other stuff. I'm using buttermilk. If you can't find buttermilk, if you don't have buttermilk in your pantry or in your refrigerator, don't worry about it. Milk is just the same. The fat content is going to be a little bit different, but like we talked about, milk is okay. It's a good substitution, and it'll work just as well. Now, as you can see, I'm adding salt and pepper, not just salt, to this cornbread. Why is that? Well, that's because when I was doing mise and prep for this, I did not think to separate salt and pepper. I did not think it mattered. Pepper is going to be good in this anyway. We're salt and peppering the veggies. This is going to be a very savory flavor, so I'm adding the right amount of salt, and some peppers just happen to come along with it. It's cooking. We can do whatever we want. That's a quote from my favorite YouTube chef, Matty Matheson. It's cooking. We can do whatever we want. All right. And we should be about ready to get this into the skillet and get it to start baking. Our oven is at 350. Is that where it needs to be? What did I say? Between 375 and 400 for at least 25 minutes. So I'm going to take it up to 400. We're going to try to blast it as much as we can. In the meantime, you want to take, I'm taking the cast iron that I use to saute the veggies. That doesn't matter too much. It's going to contribute to the flavor, of course. That's what cast irons are all about. But we're removing this oil as much as possible. Just the standing oil. It's okay to have a little layer that looks kind of greasy. That's seasoning. Not to mention, it's a natural non-stick spray. I should say a natural substitution for non-stick spray. Cool. That's pretty good. I see one little spot. I'm going to get that out. We're going to take this butter. As you see, I've had it sitting kind of on the front of the stove, and now it's super soft. We're going to take this butter. Just kind of throw it in there. Then you're going to take, we're going to use a paper towel for that. But you can use your hand, you can use a spoon. I just happen to not have a spoon. Just take this and just kind of spread it around a little bit. Just to add a little bit more of that non-stick. This is a really big pan for what we're doing. I said I was going to do this, didn't I? This is what we're going to do. Timeout, audible, flag on the play. This is what we're doing. Same deal again. A little bit of butter to that thing. Don't over butter it, because then that'll add to your batter and it'll be a super watery batter and it won't bake right. Just get a nice little bit of butter in there. You want your rubber spat for this to make sure your bowl gets clean. Just kind of cover the bottom. And you do want that to spread out a little bit because we're about to layer our veggies into this. This is where it gets exciting. The assembly part of the cornbread is exciting. Making the batter, not so much. Waiting on it to bake and hoping it turns out right, not so much. I have way too much anxiety for that. But assembling it is fun. Really, cooking is fun, but sometimes it's scary when you're cooking for a lot of people or in front of a camera.
That smells delicious.
I'm so glad to hear it. Thank you. So, like I said, we're calling some audibles here. We're doing some things a little bit differently than an ideal situation would call for, but that's fine. That's cooking. That's how it works. We do what we can with what we have. We have green tomatoes in here. Now we're adding some squash. Again, I'm not scared at all of this color. This is a beautiful color. I like it. I wish that all of them had kind of turned out like that, really. But it's how the cookie crumbles, or the cornbread mixes, I suppose. Now, I will say, if you are cooking with a cast iron, not a bad idea to go ahead and throw the cast iron that you're going to bake your cornbread in. Go ahead and throw that into the oven. I'm assuming you're going to watch this through before you try to follow along. That's what I do. That's what I would suggest even. But I do assume that that's what you're going to do. And I think it's the best idea to go ahead and get your cast iron nice and hot. So when you're adding this stuff to it, throw it in the oven. That's going to take a solid 5 to 10 minutes off of your cook time. All right. finally, this little delicious chutney that we've made. We're going to take that and add it in. I'm going bare hand here. Just bear with me. Roar. Bear noises. Cool, cool, cool. That's going to be beautiful. I'm hoping that top is going to get a nice crispy golden brown. I'm hoping the side's going to cook along with that. And here we have the start of our cornbread ratatouille. I'm going straight in the oven with it. We're going to go bottom rack. Why not? I go top rack. What do you think? Top rack, bottom rack? I think top rack. Cool. Cornbread's in the oven. And I will take this time to go ahead and say, if we have any gluten-free people, if any other dietary restrictions like that, anything similar to that, I will add as many addendums as I can into the written recipe. As you can see, by the time you're watching this, it'll be too late. I'll have an addendum in there for how to make this ratatouille straight up without any cornbread. It's really just as simple. You take your raw veggies that you've diced or sliced, you assemble it together, and I will show you with raw veg as an example. But you just kind of assemble it together, throw some olive oil over the top, take these fresh herbs that we've diced up and sprinkle that over the top, and bake it in the oven straight up. You pull it out, and instead of, it's literally going to look just like this. Instead of the cornbread mixed in, you're just going to have your veg there. No bread at all. Now, we have our cornbread baking. We have our chimichurri sitting here at room temp getting all kinds of delicious. That smells so good. That smells so, so good. I wish you could smell through the camera. I really do. Oh my goodness. We have our cotija, or in your case, your Humble Heart Farms goat cheese ready to top that with. And now we can start our pan steak. Alright, so just another recap. We have our cornbread going. We're about 10 minutes, maybe 12 into that. And we have our chimichurri sitting ready to rock. And now we're going to turn our attention to our pan steak. This is a 6-ounce filet from Brickyard, as I just said. It is important that you let it rest to room temperature. You may or may not prefer to do that. That's fine, but for the sake of the tastiest meat, and also when cooking in a cast iron, we are going to be using butter and oil to help with that process, like I said earlier. Butter to kind of soften it up and make it tender and juicy, and the oil to make it crispy. But it's still nice to get it down to room temperature to keep it from sticking. And that's just what I've always done. Again, that's another one of those where my nana, my mom, my grandma probably got that through to me, that that's important. But that's what I do. So this is almost down to room temperature. We're going to take a knob of butter, nice room temp butter, and throw it into our cast iron pan. We're going to take an equal part of olive oil and get it in there. Take your tongs, kind of whisk that around. We are getting hot again, so be sure to use your towel to navigate with the cast iron at all times. Nice. Then in goes the meat. Be sure to lay the meat in away from yourself, not the way that I just did towards me, because it just splashed my arm. That will hurt you. Now for me, salt and pepper straight is fine. And that's certainly your prerogative, how you want to flavor, season your steak. Because that chimichurri, because the cotija cheese or the goat cheese, and I'm going to add a touch of jalapeno at the end on top of that chimichurri too. So you're going to have enough flavor there. But I still, whenever I'm making a pan steak with salt, pepper, and olive oil, I do like to add, and butter, I do like to add just a little bit of crushed garlic to that. And again, I'll say this over and over again. I'm going to say it more than anything else in this video. Don't be scared of color. That steak is going to sear pretty hard in that pan. It's going to be very, very deeply brown. And that's okay. That's perfect, actually. You want a nice crispy outside. And you don't have to do much with garlic that's going in the pan. Give it a nice pop with a knife after you get the skin off, and then add it to your pan. You can use a spoon, you can use the inside of your tongs, whatever, but just kind of baste that steak. You want to make sure some of that butter and olive oil gets over the top of that steak. There you can kind of see we got a nice, hard look on that, a hard sear. That's where we want it. And the faster the better. The higher the heat, the better. Ripping and scorching is going to scorch the garlic, and it's not going to taste that good. But as high as you can get without scorching your garlic is really great, because for a fillet, the secret is fillets are safe to eat at 120 degrees. They're safe to eat super rare, even more rare than that. So you're trying to go as high and as hard as possible to get a really good sear on this steak. And then as we slice that up, you're going to see the juices come out of that. And as we plate it, you'll see how that goes. As you can see, that smoke starting to rise. That does mean that we're burning the oil. Whenever you see smoke in cooking, it's not the best thing unless you're cooking over open fire. So this over here is kind of scorching. That's why the steak's staying over here. But that's a sear I'm happy with. We're going to turn this eye off. And I'm guessing right now we're sitting at a rare. We're sitting at maybe 90 to 100 degrees. This is under rare. So we're going to take it and throw it in the oven. Just going to let that rest / continue cooking up to a rare, mid-rare, anywhere in there I'm fine with for a pan steak. Might need a salt and pepper. So we have pulled our pan steak out of the oven. I'm guessing we're around a rare, mid-rare still at our thickest part. As you can see, this cut kind of tails off a little bit. But I like a nice hard sear on it. It's not the prettiest thing yet, but once we get to garnishing, it's going to be a very, very pretty dish. And that's how we want it to be. I will emphasize that over and over again. Color is good. We do want to let the steak rest for a few minutes, not for the traditional sake of resting, but really just to make sure that when we slice into it, it's not going to lose all of its moisture before the cornbread is done. And we want to top it with this chimichurri, which is going to add some moisture, but also that vinegar has a tendency, if you let it sit for too long, to make it kind of dry. Another minute. At this point, we can check our cornbread. It is starting to get golden brown around the edges, this edge in particular, and we're getting firm around our edges too. But in the middle, it's layered very thick in the middle, so it's still a tad mushy. So we're just going to keep going until that's no longer mush. You can also, just like when baking a cake, I'm sure you've seen this trick before, very common cooking at home trick, but you can take a toothpick in the middle and stick it in, and when it comes out clean, that cornbread is done. So we're just waiting on a cook now. Alright, so we're going to start by slicing this steak. The cornbread is just about ready to come out of the oven. Now, I'm not sure about the cook on this steak. Looking at a mid-well, it looks like. I did not follow my own directions super well on this. Well, in the middle, we're getting to a nice medium, warm pink. This is not the best cut either. It's an extra cut I took from the restaurant that was not filleted, not sliced very well. So, we got a different cook along the edges, and that's okay. You can kind of see that redness in the middle. That's going to be the juiciest, most delicious part. But that's what's so great about filet is you can come and so when people come into restaurants, there is this cliche when people come into restaurants and order a well done steak. The back of house, the kitchen is like, man, I can't believe they ordered it well done. And then half the time they get Heinz 57 or ketchup, and it's too dry. With this filet, you can cook this filet to well done in a pan and finish it in the oven, and you can have it brown like this color all throughout, and you're still going to have a really tender steak. Like you can almost see with how I'm touching that, how that meat's still moving and tender and juicy, even as compared to this here. But anyway, this is how we're going to plate this. Taking our chimichurri. And honestly, you don't have to drape it and dress it like this. This is just to get a pretty picture, I suppose. But you can leave this on the side and dip it as you want, as you see fit. Or you can omit this entirely if you make it and realize it's not something you want. Just eat the steak straight with some Heinz 57 or A1. That's perfectly fine. We're going to take this cotija. Let's give it a nice sprinkle. The saltiness of that cotija, the greenness, I guess is the word, the greenness of all these herbs mixed in, the sharpness of the vinegar, and then the, well, I guess the oiliness of the olive oil really make for a great texture on top of this steak. I'm not going to use much, just a little something to add a little bit more pop of red to it. Jalapeno is entirely optional. If you're a spicy person, go on and do this. If you're not, then you're not. That's fine. Moment of truth right here. This, again, most nervous part of my day, cutting into something that I baked. Clean for the most part. That's a relief. We're going to go straight across. Come on. Just a little side note, I'm not sure that this is going to come out clean. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. It has a lot to do with how much butter you put in the pan or in the skillet before you bake. And it has a lot to do too with, this is a very weighty cornbread. It's got veggies mixed all throughout. Honestly, that came out really well. Nice. I don't mean to sound surprised. I know what I'm doing, but cool. So I'm going to take this, remove this. It's fine. And one last little thing and we'll be done. So, for our final little dish, this is something quick to throw together. Look how pretty this is. I love this lettuce. This is from Gratitude Farms, right down the road in Hansfield. A really great guy by the name of Father Kent who grows all of this. He's also listed in the Agriplex's guide, but I just love the look of this lettuce. It's grown hydroponically, which is something else that the Agriplex has a big emphasis on with Mike Weeds. He teaches hydroponics. But yeah, this lettuce is green butter crunch. It is delicious. We use it at the restaurant. We also have red butter crunch that we mix in with our, we use it for sandwiches, for salads, what have you. It is delicious lettuce. So for a salad, I like to take kind of the crunchier part of lettuce, not the heart, but down near the bottom, the crunchier. Kind of the end of that heart there is fine. And then I'll take from the top just something to give a little more of a leafy texture. I really like a leafy salad. So this part's simple. Just a nice little square. Not a chiffonade, not ribbons, nothing crazy. Just get it chopped up so you can eat it. I would love to use a meat cleaver for this. I feel really dramatic using meat cleavers. But this is nice right here. That's a nice little mix. Put this in here. That may even be too fine, honestly, but it will work. Just chop up your lettuce, and then we're breaking out the old mortar and pestle again. If you don't have a mortar and pestle, don't stress about it. This is just something to throw together a quick vinaigrette. If you have buttermilk, you can use buttermilk, dill, salt and pepper, I believe a touch of garlic powder. But anyway, a couple of different ingredients to make a ranch, a buttermilk ranch. What I'm using here are blackberries, what is left of the olive oil that I brought today, and then a little bit of this red wine vin, which again, what you'll have is apple cider vinegar, and you'll have some apples, but it's the same principle. You can make a vinaigrette out of anything. Anything you like the flavor of, give it a try sometime. You have any kind of vinegar, any kind of oil. It's equal parts, and then whatever you feel like making. This is a blackberry vinaigrette because I'm muddling blackberries into it. Make an apple vinaigrette. You can make, well, I mean, I can list it like Bubba Gump, but you get the idea. You can make a vinaigrette out of anything. Just equal parts oil, equal parts vinegar. You want to give this a taste, make sure the flavor's there. I want a few more blackberries. Perhaps a touch of sugar would be nice in this too, as crazy as that might sound. But you can salt and pepper it, you can sugar it, however you want it to taste. It's cooking, we can do what we want. I'll say that again and again too. I'd say it's about perfect. I'm going to take this, a little drizzle into the salad. You want those chunks, that's perfect. I have sunflower seeds. These came from Dreyer's as well. We do have sunflowers growing in our herb garden. Sunflower seeds, mix those in. You can add anything else you want to this salad. At this time shooting this, we're not entirely sure because of sourcing what exactly we're going to include in the box for the salad. But it's important to know that you can take the freedom to make it how you want it to be with any of your household items. That's perfectly fine. I'm eating this, so I'm going to mix it up with my hands. It's okay to get messy. I encourage it, actually. Nice little tossed salad. Raspberry vin. And we may actually use a smaller bowl to get a nice little picture of it. This here, take this here as well. Come on. And all together, something like this. Alright, here we have our final product. Our pan steak Argentina with chimichurri, topped with that salty, delicious cotija cheese. Our cornbread ratatouille, nice and herbaceous. It's so delicious. I just took a bite off camera. It came out really well. And then our side salad. I made a blackberry vinaigrette with that, but you can take your liberties with that. I hope it turned out as well as this one did. I hope you had a great, fun time doing it. And please share your results, share the liberties you took on social media, and let us know how it turned out. Thank you so much. Once again, I'm Chef Braxton. I'm just gonna take a break. it does this. We have a deep freeze like this at the restaurant, and we're always opening and closing again. It's like you have to stand there and wait. In the middle of service, we have 5 tickets hanging. We're just like, there we go. Just the way it goes.